Awesome. I think we can get started. So thank you all for joining today. So my name is Spencer, and I work on business operations side at CoinList. And today we have Luca from Oasis. Luca heads the product and go-to-market at Oasis, and he was the main designer behind the Oasis Rose Garden. So today we just have a live broadcast with him. He's gonna first run through Oasis, do a quick pitch about what Oasis is, like the tech behind it and the different use cases. Then we'll move into a Q&A section. So then if you have any questions along the way, feel free to throw them into the chat or into the Q&A box right under in that bottom bar, and then I will field those questions as we go. So yeah, take it away, Luca.
Cool, thanks, Spencer. Hello, everyone. This is Luca from Oasis, and I lead the DeFi products there. I joined the company over 2 years ago, and there has been an amazing journey so far to get this network started and already see applications on top. So today what we're doing, as Spencer said, we're going to start with a little bit of an introduction of Oasis. It's going to take 10-12 minutes, no more than that, hopefully, and then we're going to go into a more Q&A from Spencer and from the audience. So I'm going to start like sharing a few slides. I thought it was an easier way to handle this virtual event. And the goal here for this 10 minutes is really seeing the Oasis network in action. So we want to do is really understanding why Oasis exists, what problem we're solving, and see some of the use cases that we actually enable. So the core definition of the Oasis network is a first scalable, privacy-enabled blockchain platform for open finance and a responsible data economy. Let's see what that means, right? So we touch upon two items, the three items actually: the Oasis network, the privacy component, privacy and scalability component, the financial aspect, and the data aspect of that. So let's try to go one by one and see what they mean. So the core layer is the Oasis network. The Oasis network is a blockchain, layer one, of course. That's why we have our own token. And we enable smart contracts similar to other platforms, but we have two differentiating factors. One is the scalability aspect, and one is the privacy aspect. For the scalability aspect, we put together a series of techniques that allow to parallelize a lot of the aspects of the blockchain, mainly computation, consensus, and also storage. And when we parallelize the three elements, this also means that we can scale these three elements independently based on the needs that come up. So our architecture is very flexible in that sense. That's how we achieve scalability. The two most important layers are probably the consensus layer and the computation layer, the compute layer. On the consensus layer, we are proof of stake, and that's why the Rose Garden was particularly important. And on the compute layer, we created this very unique architecture that allows to build different runtimes, which is a space where the computation happens. And we give the ability of scaling and creating multiple runtimes at the same time. And the goal here is serving specific applications the best way. On the privacy side, we have a combination of we use a combination of hardware and software to guarantee the execution of the smart contracts inside something that can be decently represented with the idea of a black box. So the data and the computation live inside the black box, and only some outputs are returned to the based on some policies that regulate what's possible and what's feasible. So this is a brief explanation of the Oasis network, and happy to take more questions. And then let's go into the open finance, or like a DeFi, which is the part that enables this flow of money in a programmatic way. And then we also go into the data side of what we can enable. So let's start from the scalable and private DeFi. Let's try to see what this means first. So you probably heard of DeFi at this stage, and you also understood the idea of creating a new financial service or a new financial system, actually, that is not even based anymore on wealth, geography, or status, but it's just built on a series of programmable rules that everyone is in a position to respect. So those rules are very strict, but also very transparent for everyone. And as long as you respect those rules, it's fine, and you don't have to you don't have to care anymore about your predetermined situation. On a more technical standpoint, we bring, again, like scalability and privacy to the DeFi space, and we try to solve some of the problems that the current DeFi space is seeing. Because of full transparency and because of low scalability, there are a lot of side effects that are preventing the masses from joining the DeFi ecosystem. On the scalability side, we can reach up to 1,000 transactions per second, which also means that we can support complex workloads, which is very unique of the Oasis network. And at the same time, these all translates into lower transaction fees as well, which means that on the Oasis network, you don't have problems that are very common of other networks, such as front running or the ability of spamming the mempool, which is this place where all the transactions happen, to then increase the average transaction fees. On the privacy side, it's very interesting because privacy here doesn't really mean privacy coin or the idea of transacting money in a private way. We are far from that. But what we really mean is the ability of keeping some data private in a user control data capsule that can be used in many more applications, and that can be used in a way that the user retains the control while giving selective access to the entity that needs that type of computation. And that's very powerful because, as we're going to see in a second, it's possibly going to enable a lot of new use cases that are not really possible in the current transparent model. So these are just some examples of what we can enable. When we refer to private DeFi, it's very important to keep in mind that the current DeFi is currently building all the new building blocks that are parts of a bigger financial system. So when we refer to private DeFi here, we try to thought a little bit more of what this means, right? And we went like category by category, looking at how the situation would improve. And we found significant improvements in spaces such as private lending, where instead of revealing the initial and final balance of your account or transaction, you can keep that private, and essentially you don't have to reveal the type of lending and borrowing activity that you've done. I don't want to go into all of them because it's going to take too long, but hopefully you can get a sense from this slide of what a private DeFi ecosystem can actually enable. And now I want to reference something that I touched upon before, which is something that we really believe in and we really think is going to be powering the strong innovation in the decentralized finance space. So when you consider one of the most important primitives of a financial system, there is this space of lending, right? Which is this ability of having a better and more efficient capital allocation, connecting who has more capital to whoever needs some capital. And the connection is done by an intermediary that charges an interest rates that is then split across different parts. In the decentralized space, this is growing massively, and it's really great because essentially it disintermediates the process of borrowing and lending. The connection between the supply side and the demand side, which is like the borrowing side and the loaning side, is actually done by a protocol and no longer by a company. But the problem that right now the industry is facing is that there is a strong need for over-collateralization, which means that given that there is no reputation system, you need to provide way more collateral than the loan that you're asking for, which makes this entire system extremely valuable and extremely valid, but only for people who are long on some of the currencies in the crypto space. And instead of keeping those currencies in their wallet, they are happy to store it in these protocols and get an interest out of that. Again, the normal collateralization needs way more than what is actually needed as a loan. Now, this is great, as I said before, but there is a missing piece, which is this reputation system that can separate the actors that are having good behaviors from the actors that are having bad behaviors. And of course, if you have good behaviors, you should get a better interest rate than if you tend to have bad behaviors. That's what happens in the market. So with the Oasis technology and with the usage of what I referenced before as this black box, you can really achieve this. You can put a lot of data in this black box and in this capsule, which is a concept that we love to refer to. And the user controls this capsule, controls the data that is inside this capsule, and can give selective access for some credit risk models to the protocols or to whoever wants to build these credit systems on top. This is great because even when the access is granted, the data ends up staying with the user, and only the output of this model, which can be as simple as a number or a yes or a no, is actually returned to the system. A lot of companies are believing in this private and scalable DeFi that we're enabling, and we keep adding partners almost weekly. So far, we signed great partnerships that we're really proud of with primary players in the space. Wire, Chainlink, Provable Balancer, Meter, Circle are just some of them. And I really encourage everyone to keep up with the ecosystem because, as I said before, the partnerships that we're building are increasing every day. Let's quickly move to the data side of what we are enabling, which is a good sequel from the reputation system that I said before. So the way to see the actual user-controlled web and this idea that data should stay with the users is basically represented in 3 steps. The step number 1 is you take a piece of data, you tokenize it, which means you fragment it into manageable tokens. You give control to the users, and you create some incentives for the user to actually share, which could be money, it could be simple incentives, it could be whatever the user gets from using a certain application. And this is a unique property of the Oasis blockchain. Through the combination of blockchain itself that is used to log information and to enforce the user's rights, and secure computing, which ensures that the data is not revealed to unauthorized parties, we can achieve this data encapsulation that really is nothing more than a piece of data and a policy attached to that, all wrapped in a capsule that is owned by the user. This is the most important piece. The way to think about it is in the current web, when you connect to a website, when you put your email address or when you take an action, all the data goes to some database, and some maybe company or some entity in general has control over this database. You can definitely send emails and have them remove this data, but you don't have control over that data, right? You don't really know what happens in the back. With the Oasis technology, users will be put at the center. They will manage their capsule, and the applications that want to access that capsule need to get some permission from the user. What this means is also that they need to establish a way to cooperate with this user, which is something that we love to refer to as data rewards, right? So imagine this situation. You are downloading an application on your phone, you're simply accessing a web app. There is an identity that lives in this bottom layer on the Oasis network that is tied to you, which is this capsule. And the second you want to access that web app, the web app has to issue a request to you almost in real time, which can also be pre-approved, of course. And you can set up some policies for saying yes or no. So for instance, you can say yes to healthcare or healthcare providers to your health data, or maybe you want to say no, like depending on what you want. So you can create the rules that you want. But the point is that you can be managing this capsule, and the application on top needs to find the right incentive for you to share that data. And the basic incentive could be money, which means that we can create this system where there is a process of staking and lending your data to a borrower on our side, on the other side, that needs to pay you a little bit of money for borrowing that data for the days, for instance, that this data is borrowed. This is just an example for now, but this is a unique property of the Oasis network. A real use case that we are supporting and that the Oasis network is actually powering is this company called Nebula, which is a DNA genomic data testing. So whenever you take your DNA test, for instance, the data is then instead of being revealed to the company itself, stays with you. So you sign up for Flow, you decide whether you want to give consent to Nebula after you receive your test. If you want, Nebula can use this for their own computation. But even when they do so, the data stays private. That's the most important thing. So you get the exact same results without having to care about losing privacy and about having to care about not controlling your information. So this concludes my presentation. I didn't want to keep it longer than this, but I'm happy to take any questions from Spenser and from the audience.
Awesome. Thanks for that. This was very informative. So I guess to kind of go back to like the beginning of the slides and like where you talked about, so I guess I'm a little curious about what's the story behind Oasis and like what made you decide to join the team initially, since it sounds like Oasis has very clear differentiators from other blockchain projects, and like what attracted you to those things personally.
Yeah, personally, my background has always been in large organizations. I was working at Google, American Express, Procter and Gamble, and I work in their product analytics teams most often, which means that basically on day zero, the second I was hired, I sat on a chair and I had to issue requests to get access to like data tables, right? And I always thought it was a very weird process because essentially without having to give any specific information to the company itself, aside of a very high level description of what I want, I got access to very sensitive information, and the level of trust that the company had to put on me was actually massive for essentially no reason, right? And so I thought of, this is weird. Like, it's weird that an employee based on a chair in London, which is where I was, has to issue a request on the other side of the world to someone who never saw you, doesn't know anything about you, just reads one line of text and says yes or no. And as a user as well, I thought of this idea that like this paradigm essentially that is created between sharing and losing control and not sharing and losing the business opportunity or the opportunity itself was kind of weird. And I started thinking of a way to create this magic black box. And while at Berkeley, I got in touch with Professor Donsong, which was working on something extremely similar to this idea from a much more technical standpoint. And we thought that joining forces made sense because I was solving this problem more from a like go-to-market standpoint, and I had very clear use cases that I wanted to see live, very similar to the ones that we're describing today or in this period. And she was approaching the problem from the like really innovative and strong architecture, having experienced how other blockchain came to market, and having had the privilege and the luck of moving as a second mover. Yeah, so I think, and we both thought it was a good like marriage at that point.
Interesting. So I guess with kind of piggybacking on that, so I guess the idea of like a responsible data economy is pretty central to the Oasis team's like vision and like what you guys see in the long term. Can you talk a bit more about that and like where do you see that in say like 10 years or so, and like how do you think that is going to change the current state of how web apps and whatnot are done?
Yeah, another great question. So responsible data economy is really a central idea, not just as a standalone thing, but really powers a lot of the decisions that we take at Oasis. Like we discuss new products, new partnerships, new players every day. And the idea of a responsible data economy is often a decision maker behind a yes or a no, right? Behind the decision of pursuing a certain decision or not. So the responsible data economy is really this idea that data should be a factor of production. When you consider like, this is very philosophical, but I love it. When you consider like GDP and these like big numbers that are the foundation of a lot of decisions and economies, there are some missing factors in the current economy, right? And because there are some missing factors, there are very misleading behaviors, right? Like the GDPR doesn't capture the data. Sorry, the GDP doesn't really take care of the amount of data that is produced. Doesn't really take care of the way this data is produced. Doesn't really take care of the innovation that is done in a lot of sectors. If I produce a bulb lights that consume 3 times more energy, that's actually good for the GDP, right? That's not a bad sign. It's actually good. It makes the GDP go up. And same thing is the data. If I treat the data like in a non-powerful way, in an unfair way, that's actually kind of better because the output is better. Now, so we started thinking of the incentive model, and we started thinking of what are the ways that we take a piece of information. What is a piece of information actually useful for? And in most cases, a piece of information is useful to take a decision. And that decision is actually producing some tangible output there. So why not considering the data as a factor of production? And who has control over this data? Who is the owner of this data? Who produces this data? Now, bear with me for a second. And one thing that I love to emphasize here is that there has been a lot of talking around fairness of who controls the data. One of the things I really believe we interpret rightly at Oasis is that the argument of being fair can only get you to a certain point. If you don't understand the right incentives, you don't really get to the point of adoption. And one of the things we do at Oasis really well, in my opinion, is understanding who has the incentive to do what. So the blockchain is great because it brings the protocol level incentives. DeFi is great because it brings protocol plus application layer incentives. But I think we can do more. We can go one layer above that, linking these two bottom ones, and finding ways for companies to cooperate with users through incentives that are only possible because of the encapsulation of the data.
Interesting. And then I guess to segue that into the implementation of, the Oasis network, you mentioned that you guys use a paradigm architecture. Like, what made you decide to use architecture, and what are some of the benefits of using a paradigm architecture compared to how the execution layer of other blockchains are?
Yeah, there are so there is the initial part is like splitting the execution compute from the consensus, and this is a benefit itself because it allows to scale these two layers independently. So that's the first benefit. The other side of your question has to do with the paradigm itself, and the paradigm is really this place where the execution of the contract happens. Now, if you have a little bit of a, for whoever has a little bit of a background in computing, every application has very different needs from a very architectural standpoint and from the execution standpoint. There are needs in terms of packages that are supported. There are needs in terms of composability of different libraries that are needed, and so on and so forth. So having a one-size-fits-all model didn't really work because early on, we realized that while we're talking to different companies, large or small, essentially everyone had some level of different needs. And given where blockchain is in the phase of maturity, it's virtually impossible to point a finger, pick one, and say, this is definitely going to be the most optimized model. At the speed at which we are innovating, and when I say we, I mean the entire industry, it would be basically impossible to pick one model and make it work for everyone. And we're already experiencing this with Ethereum. Ethereum has done an outstanding job at teaching the world about this idea of smart contracts, but it's already becoming limited. The problems are coming up, right? And the solutions are not easy because of the lack of flexibility. So we wanted to create a much more flexible network that based on these paradigms, which are parallel executions of parallel runtimes, and each runtime can be created to serve specific use cases the way developers think it's best for that type of use case that they're building.
That makes sense. And I guess to follow up on that, because of the flexibility of the paradigm architecture, you talked a lot about privacy earlier, and a lot of the privacy implementation currently is around this like black box architecture. Are there other types of privacy implementations that the paradigm architecture can allow for in the future, and that your team is planning to incorporate, or you're just thinking about using this black box for the time being?
So yeah, like first of all, the black box is a good example because it makes it super easy, but it makes it also very like sketchy at the same time. And one thing that I want to say is that it's really like a combination of decentralized black boxes that are actually verified by the consensus layer that helps the whoever is requesting some level of computation like verify that computation is actually correct, right? And there are very different ways to do it, and one is a simple majority of 51%, but there's like so many ways to run the computation and the consensus. So that's an important distinction to understand, that there is no like magical black box in the center, and if that black box fails, like everything else breaks. That doesn't happen. In terms of other implementation of privacy, I think like the flexibility of the runtime already allows for a lot of the flexibility in designing future solutions. And when it comes to privacy, there's so many techniques that can be implemented, at least on a theoretical level. When you move it in production, it's a lot of difference because there are like requirements in performance, and specific use cases need to be supported and optimized. But the one thing that I think is interesting is that right now we are relying on this like piece of hardware called the trusted environment, the trusted execution environment. And even that piece itself can actually take it and make it better, maybe like open source or improved in any way. So for sure, the answer to your question is for sure, we're looking at ways to be even more flexible in the future. But I think in terms of both complexity of the transaction, number of transactions, and level of privacy guarantee, and techniques that you can add on top, such as differential privacy, I think the actual implementation is really good for majority of the use cases that we thought of when we designed the network.
Interesting. And so I guess kind of segueing into the DeFi side of Oasis, since you're the go-to-market guy, it sounds like your approach is to bring privacy into this into DeFi space and bring scalability into the DeFi space. I guess in the short term, like as the Oasis network is launching, like what is your thinking and your strategy with regards to building out that DeFi ecosystem on Oasis, kind of bootstrapping that process?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So when you bootstrap, and I mean, this is a network, right? And it's the Oasis network at the bottom, but also it's a DeFi network on top, because there are people who are building the central key components of the financial system, and then there are the users, which in this case are the applications first, and then their users that need to come and consume these services. So it's actually a network. Like the services come if there are users, and the users stay if there are good services at the same time. But the blockchain industry, when we observed this industry from the outside for a few months, when I say this industry, actually I mean DeFi in this case, we noticed that the promises of blockchain tended to precede what actually would happen in blockchain, right? And we decided that the first place where to enter the market from was the supply side. As a network, we have a responsibility of making developers' life as easy as possible and as convenient as possible and as incentivized as possible. And so from the supply side, we are essentially working on increasing the ecosystem with selected partners that support the vision of a private and scalable like blockchain. And we thought that providing all these pre-built integrations to the upcoming developers was the actual way to go to market first. Once we got significant traction, and let me say, we got outstanding traction in the number and quality of the partners that we onboarded over the last 3-4 months, we started working with the applications on top. And the way we see the applications is really like twofold, right? We think the applications should come because of these pre-made integrations that we like created and brought to the network. And also because of the incentives that these applications themselves can create to their users. And here I want to reference the benefits of scalability of privacy one more time. It's definitely a process, and definitely we learn every day. But so far, I'm very impressed by the level of partnerships that we have built on the DeFi side for sure, but also the deeper infrastructure level, starting from the node operators who are giving us exceptional responses on the network itself. And on the application side, I'm very, very happy to see that we haven't even fully launched our network, and we already see a lot of usage and a lot of companies, no matter what size, this is very important as well, that are coming and are appreciating what we have been doing. Even the Oasis Labs, which is the enterprise focused arm, has built APIs that abstract a lot of the complexity and bring them to the enterprises. And the responses from the enterprises, the second that the blockchain complexity was abstracted away from them, has been like phenomenal. We were able to bring partners, and I hope we can share more over the next few weeks as a company. We shared only like a little bit of the information so far. But yeah, that has been like seeing this ecosystem grow has been really and immensely rewarding from an internal standpoint as well.
Yeah, I'm definitely it's definitely a good feeling to see everything being built out, the infrastructure being built out over time, and partnerships being formed. And I guess in the short term, like, you know, what's next for the Oasis network? Like, what are your plans for launching? When's mainnet going to happen? If you can talk about that, and like, yeah, we can go from there.
Yeah, clearly, we are like the actual mainnet launch, the full launch, because right now we are in beta. Just to remind this, the full launch is really around the corner, and this is something that like when I say around the corner, is really happening like most likely next week. So very exciting time. So that's our focus, of course. And when I say our focus, I mean that we need to guarantee that all the pieces are in place, right? The node operators, the switch from beta to live goes like smoothly. The tests, the extensive testing that we've done over the previous months confirm the performance at launch. Like all these things are our focus right now. Once the network is live, the focus will be shifted on ensuring that the partners that we're working with are perfectly served by the features of the network and the support, the community support that has been true so far, right? So this is absolutely the like main high level goals. The Rose Garden is seeing great participation so far, and even that is going to create a lot of new stakers. So we're very excited that people join this activity because we took it as a sign of confidence that we've done a good work. But at the same time, we also want to feel very proud of the fact that we brought a lot more people to understand what staking is, such a core concept behind the idea of blockchain. So this is so we want to be extremely dedicated to make sure that the process of running the Rose Garden with you guys goes like perfectly, and we are in very good shape there. And then what else can I say? Yeah, I think those are the main goals, because from here we go even like one level deeper. And if this is true, we can also serve the enterprise clients that are working with us like properly. And hopefully we can make more announcements if that works. Increasing the ecosystem is definitely keeps being a priority, but is a priority as well now. And yeah, so with a network, with a live network that is decentralized from launch, with all the metrics in place and all the partnerships and the partners in place and a growing ecosystem and of small and big players, I think we are in a good shape. We just need to make sure that all these pieces like fit together at launch. But it's the most exciting thing, right? Seeing this coming live.
Sure. And I guess kind of segueing, and since we have around 20 minutes left, kind of talk about the Rose Garden. There are quite a few questions about the Rose token. But
Yeah.
before we go there, let's talk about the Rose Garden. Like, as the main architect behind the Rose Garden, what was your thinking behind it? What was the rationale? And like, what did you want to achieve from the Rose Garden?
So we observed the market, and every single type of activity has been done in some capacity, right? From fully decentralized to fully centralized to pure speculation to actually good demonstration of effort and so on. And we really thought of, given the structure of the network, we never gave a chance to our community to engage with us on a more practical level. So the old challenge here was understanding what engage means, right? So we wanted to find a way to bring the community to actually experience something around the network that implies effectively two aspects: some way to get access to the Rose token without asking to make an investment or without positioning anything as an investment, because that's not what we wanted. And at the same time, make our community members understand the properties of our network, mainly in terms of staking and some level of security, right? Those were the high level goals. So we thought of an activity that could piggyback and take the fundamental properties of this farming activity and liquidity bootstrapping that we're seeing in the DeFi space, abstracting a lot of the complexity for the users to join, basically like not having to buy tokens on a market, not having to connect multiple wallets, not having to pay crazy fees to join, not having to do financial calculations to see whether it made some level of financial sense to join. And also we also didn't want to lose people on the funnel, because like, oh, what is staking? How do I do it? Where do I connect? Where do I transfer my token? Am I gonna get the tokens back? So all this reasoning, all this reasoning prompted this activity. And again, once we had the farm term that we borrowed from the industry, and once we had the Rose, which was the main token that has a connection with privacy, and we have a blog post that speaks for that in case anyone is interested. Once we have these two elements, it was pretty clear that the gardening aspect was the one that was like gluing all these elements together. And the idea of cultivating is actually what staking does, right? You put a little bit of effort into something, you get something back, and by doing that, you also make the underlying condition stronger. And that's what we wanted to do with the Rose Garden, right? And I think we have done that successfully according to the feedback that we got and according to the participation that we saw. The feedback we're getting from the community has been great. We have a strong network of ambassadors who are in touch with us, and they are reporting very much higher level of happiness. We're seeing all the metrics up, including participation, including like subscription to our Telegram channel, and so on and so forth. So we take all these positive signs. CoinList has been a fantastic partner so far, because really makes things easy for every user, and this is absolutely important. And yeah, and I think this is going well. Like, there are a few more days to participate in case anyone is interested, but we are approaching the end of the participation window, which is going to be next Wednesday. And after that, there's going to be a 1 month of farming, which is this moment where these tokens are generated. And from there are 5 months of staking for the people who decided to do both activities. So the tokens farmed in the farm activities are going to be transferred to the cultivate period. They're going to be staked for real via one of our node operator partners, and they earn some reward for making the network safer over time.
Yeah, awesome. And I guess there's some audience questions about the staking as well. So
Yeah.
I can answer that really quick. So Giacomo, CoinList is aiming to provide staking services after Cultivate. So we should have that live by the end of the Rose Garden. So you can feel free to leave your tokens there. And then in terms of the questions about custody, we are also aiming to provide custody on CoinList Wallet. So you can just keep your Rose tokens on the CoinList Wallet. So then actually a question we had was, well, with regards to the Rose token is, what is the use case of the Oasis Rose token? Like, what do people use that token for?
Yeah, that's a question that we get all the time, of course, and we also understand why. Like, there's everything in the industry that is hard to keep up. So the Rose token is really fundamental to power the network. Like, without the Rose token, the network doesn't run. As simple as that. You can think of the staking solution. So the staking is this process where in order to reduce a lot of the energy and in order to make the network like still safe, the proof of stake networks are these networks that require node operators to not to solve a piece of computation in like everyone the same one, which is what happens for Bitcoin, and that's why you probably hear that it's very energy intensive. But it requires these node operators to put some money on the table, and then based on whoever is elected, essentially like get some of the money back, or like there is a mechanism to make it rewarding for the entity. But the point is, there is a process of staking and getting some tokens back instead of duplicating the effort to solve some piece of computation. So from this, it's pretty clear that you need Rose tokens to be able to stake Rose tokens. And without the staking part, like the network would not be essentially decentralized, because there's not going to be a set of validators, a set of node operators that can verify a certain computation. So really what the Rose is about is as simple as it makes the network run. Without Rose, there's not going to be any Oasis. Maybe if you're not familiar with this whole process, something factually incorrect, but that can explain in a very simple term what this is about. You can see this as some level of cloud credits. Without any cloud credits, you cannot really store or use the cloud for any type of computation, and that's sort of the equivalent thing, even if there are like so many differences. But I just wanted to make it super simple. And in the future, of course, there's going to be additional elements and reasons why staking will be important. Why the Rose tokens will be important. It's a decentralized network, so governance will be like leading the decisions that are powered, or leading the decisions that determine the next version of Oasis. And then like all the applications that are built on top, we'll have to use the Rose tokens as an underlying entity to run the computation that I was mentioning before.
Sure. And I guess leading to the question that always gets asked, which is, what are the plans for exchange listings? I know issuers are usually pretty sensitive about this, but whatever information you can share here would be good.
Yeah, no, absolutely. This is going to be a disappointing answer from me, simply because being a decentralized network, we don't control the listing process of tokens. In a decentralized network, there is the funding team, which is the team that runs the operations at the very beginning, but there is not going to be a central entity that determines the decision. So it's not really Luca or other team members that are devoted to sign or to decide the strategy with exchanges. But once the tokens are generated at mainnet launch, which is happening next week, the tokens are assigned to the early contributors and to whoever needs to have access to the token, including the CoinList participants, of course, according to a release schedule that is pre-released predetermined and is publicly available on the website of the foundation, which I can also link here just in case anyone is interested. And from there, like exchanges are free to list it, not to list it. They can do whatever they want. So we don't control the process ourselves.
Got it. And I guess another audience question was, when Oasis launches, will users have the ability to use off-chain data in these data capsules, or is this like further down the roadmap?
No, so this part is basically is what the partnerships with the oracles are meant to serve. Like the oracles are these entities that connect a data source to a public chain, essentially. So we have two types. Actually, let me rephrase this. Like the oracles is one way of doing it, and the second one is the API that we have, we being Oasis Labs in this case, built on top of the Oasis network. So those are the two entities that serve the question, that serve the use cases that you described in the question. In the case of the oracles, you have a public source, and you need a system that verifies that data is actually like true, which could be the price of a token, it could be the price of a stock, it could be the weather data, whatever. And this part, like we have partnerships with Chainlink as our preferred oracle, and Provable as well. But so they are building, we're building, and they're building an integration there, and so that part is will be available. And the second part is whenever you have a company, and that's the case of Nebula, the use case that I described in my presentation before. Whenever you register on the Nebula website using the Oasis Labs flow, you can create your own identity in the system, and the Nebula reporting system and analytics system automatically connects to this API that we call Parcel, that is actually in alpha and beta used right now, or like version right now. And then the system like connects to the blockchain and enables this decentralized computation through the decentralized consensus that happens. So those are the two main places where data can come from.
Gotcha. And I guess since we have around 8 minutes left, kind of wrap up some more practical questions. So as MENA is approaching, staking will obviously be a part of the mainnet. Is there a way for people to participate in staking independently of the Rose Garden? And like, if they do so, like, what are some of the existing custody options for them to use?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is very similar question to the listing side. Like we, being a decentralized network, those entities are built by partners. So on the website that I linked before, there are specific sections on. Let me see if I can find it. But there are essentially like places and wallets that support the Rose token. The Ledger is one of those. The BitPie is another wallet that you can download on your iPhone and use it as pre-built support for Rose, and many more are coming. On the staking side, which was the first part of your question, while I only answered the custody part of this question, the node this is very similar to like every question this type. Like the node operators have their own process of receiving what are called like delegated tokens, which means that you have a token, you delegate it to a node operator for staking, and the node operators have their own way of onboarding users. So the answer is yes, it's possible. There are other places than CoinList to do it, but we don't have one that is like main for Oasis. Again, why? Because it's a decentralized network, and these node operators are coming and set up the procedures that they think are appropriate for onboarding the users.
That makes sense. And I guess the last question I have is, where do you see the Oasis network and Oasis Labs in say 5 to 10 years?
Well, I love to think that the tools that we are enabling and that the Oasis net and the capabilities that the Oasis network brings to the market will be enabling the responsible data economy that we talked about before. So my dream is that there is this programmatic way to exchange money and data in one unique flow, and possibly that the user doesn't even have to interact with, because again, the user wants to consume the service, doesn't want to deal with the rules of establishing data partnerships. But my dream is that large organizations, when they become large and when they have that turning point that shifts the power from the user to the company, because the company sort of outgrows the users, up to the point that the user can't really give up on that specific service. Social networks are a good example for this. Like when you get to that point, my dream is that because of the enablement of this responsible data economy, and because more and more knowledge is coming around the idea of controlling, sharing, and staking the data and earning some level of rewards. My dream is that all this infrastructure will be used to enable much better and incentive-based collaborations between users and companies, centralized and decentralized.
Awesome. Thank you for this time. And I guess kind of to wrap up, I'll talk really quick about the Rose Garden. And again, as Luca had mentioned, the participation period for the Rose Garden is next Wednesday. The specific time is it ends November 18th, 11:59 p.m. UTC. So, you know, between now and then, you still have time to go participate. Everyone, again, has an up to $2,000 limit of either USDC or USDT. And then, again, the Oasis Garden is split into two chunks, the Oasis Farm and Oasis Cultivate. Farm is 1 month long. You just lock your USDC or USDT. And then if you decide to participate in Cultivate as well, then you're going to be staking the tokens you earn from Rose Farm for a 5 month period, which will end, I think it's next April. So yeah, I'm going to toss a link here. The CoinList Oasis page. This is where you can go and participate in this event. Yeah, anything I'm missing there, Luca, that you want to bring up?
No, you said everything. Maybe the one thing we haven't said before is when I was describing activities, like a question that comes up a lot is why only $2,000? Like people would like to put more in some cases. The one thing I'd say, this is an activity meant to be for the community, not an investment vehicle, not an investment product. That's why we wanted to keep it very small in terms of like let's call him the contribution that people see it. And given that the pool is going to be distributed across the people who participate, we didn't think it was fair to allow the situation to create the space for a bigger player to come, put a lot of money in it, and essentially walk away with the entire or like a vast majority of the reward pool. That was the missing element. Otherwise, you said everything. There's time to participate, and it's a great activity, in my opinion, because it teaches people, it teaches you how the blockchain mechanism works. So feel free to come to our Telegram group and ask questions there. And yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, thank you for your time again, Luca. And this is all going to be recorded and put on YouTube after this. So thank you all. And if you have any questions, feel free to email into team@coinlist.co or reach out on one of the Oasis community channels. Thank you all. Thank you, Luca.
Bye.
Have a good one.